Good evening. My name is Lamar Harris. Today I am here to continue our program about stewardship. The program this evening is presented by Rock Solid Finance, and we are going to talk about budgeting. Many people hate the word budget because they think it's very restrictive. However, we all need a sound plan to handle our finances. A budget is just a plan on how we should spend our money, or should I say, God's money. If you want to stop living from paycheck to paycheck, you need a sound budget in place. After a short while, you will find your finances will be much more secure. You will free yourself from worrying about your finances all the time because you will be in control of your revenue. Therefore, please listen to our presentation today as we learn more about budgeting.
I took some time unpacking the foundational principle of stewardship and the first principle of tithing because I believe with everything inside of me that those two concepts are by far the most important things that you'll hear today. They're also the things that you'll never hear from a CPA, a financial planner, opening up a financial book. Those are just things that you won't hear from the financial industry. And we wonder why America's finances are in such a mess. But the next three are what some would call the more practical principles. That's what we're going to dive into right now. But keep in mind, they only work with the first principle in practice. So with that understanding in place, let's look at these three practical principles that all start with a plan. As a steward, we realize that everything we've been given is from God. And if you're a parent, you know that the most valuable thing that God has entrusted to you is your kids. You know, we only have our kids for a short amount of time, usually only for 18 years. Well, we hope for only 18 years. Some of you are going to have your kids for a little bit longer than that. And one of the places that we send our kids throughout the week to be invested in is school. Now, that's where I'm at right now. And here's what we expect from our schools and from our teachers. We expect them to have really thought through and planned for how they're going to invest in educating our kids. And that's why teachers are required to have lesson plans and accountability. I mean, could you imagine talking to a teacher and you're asking them, hey, what's your plan for how you're going to invest in my kids' learning? And they replied, we don't really do plans around here. We just kind of wing it. We hope the kids learn something, but we just let them do their own thing. They color pictures at times, play video games. We watch movies. Every once in a while, I'll go to the whiteboard and I'll draw something for the kids and maybe try to do something. But planning isn't really what this school's all about. Would you send your kids to that school? Okay, dumb question. Now listen carefully. Just like our kids, at the end of our life, the Bible makes it clear that we need to give an account of how we used what God entrusted to us, including our money. And money can be used for a lot of good, or it can be wasted and used for things that could actually harm us or others. So oftentimes, I think we think, well, I know God cares about the tithe, and we talked about that, but after that, the rest is ours. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. God cares about you managing the other 90% as well. So how do we manage that other 90% for God and really do it effectively? Well, it starts with principle number 2 for rock solid finances, which is this. A steward has a plan for how they're going to use money that isn't their own. When you're managing money that's not your own, you better have a plan. Could you imagine going to a financial advisor, giving him money for your future, and you wanted to know how he's going to manage and grow it for you? And his reply was this: well, we don't really do that. We don't do plans. I've tried them in the past. They don't really fit my personality. How much money would you give him to manage for you? Sometimes I think God might be looking at us the same way. So how do you have a plan for using money that God puts in your care? Well, that plan is called Some of us have a hard time saying it because we think it's a 4-letter word. It's called a budget. That plan is called a budget. Listen, budgets have gotten a bad rap in our culture. You'll hear someone say, I'm on a budget, man. And we would reply back, dude, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, you're on a budget? I mean, we treat it as if they have cancer or disease. Why is that? Because most people view budgets as restrictive, but they should be the exact opposite. A budget should add freedom and clarity in your life. Listen, there's so much about our lives that feels unclear. I mean, think about all the things you don't have clarity on, whether it's work or what your career should be or relationships. Should I date them, marry them, dump them? Where should we live? Where should we send our kids to school? Should we get a pet? What kind? How big? I mean, life just isn't clear sometimes. But if there's one area of your life that you should have crystal clear clarity on, it's money. Because here's why. When you get paid, you control 100% of where your money goes. You should have total clarity. You're the only one that's in control. And it should add clarity to your life. But a lot of people have had a really bad experience with budgeting. They would say something like this. Yeah, I've tried it. I've tried budgeting and it just doesn't work. It kind of doesn't fit my personality. I'm kind of more of a free spirit, man. So I just kind of stay away from that. But most of the time, that's because they were using a budget that probably didn't fit them. Let me ask you a question. Who creates most budgets in the world? Honestly, it's usually super nerds. It is. And sometimes those budgets we use are not designed for the average person. Now, for a lot of you, you just got a huge relief. Oh, that's why it's not working. So what I want to help you out with is I want to tell you the best budget that's available on the market today. I've looked over hundreds of them, and I want you to know what I believe is simply the best budget you can use. You ready to hear it? The best budget available is the one that gets used. It's the one that gets used. And if you don't use your budget, even if you have one, guess what? It doesn't work. It doesn't matter how fancy it is. You might get the award for the prettiest budget. It might have a great design to it. It might be the most advanced budget in the world, but if you don't use it, guess what? It doesn't work. So I really don't care what budget you use. Just make sure that you actually use it. Now, I do believe that if you've never budgeted before, you do need to start off simple. And using a paper budget is usually the best way to start. And included in your material in this class is a paper budget to really get you started. There are also some links available that have some more budgets that you can just print off and use as well. The key is to get started with something now and realize your first budget that you put together, it's not going to be perfect. That's okay. Don't get discouraged. Stick with it because having a budget is absolutely worth it. Now, if you're married, I have some specific advice for you. First of all, you need to see yourself with your spouse as a team. And God has this funny sense of humor. He puts people together that are opposites, because opposites attract. And one person may be unbelievably detail-oriented, and the other person may just be loose, creative, and unorganized. And sometimes that can cause tension and cause problems, especially around finances. Oftentimes, one person is a spender, another person's a saver. So when you're budgeting, remember, first, it's a team sport. You have to do it together regardless of your personality types. So oftentimes, here's what happens. One person, usually the detailed saver, will lock themselves in a room. They'll spend hours putting together what they think is God's gift to budgeting. They'll come out of the room as if they've just solved world hunger. They'll walk up to their spouse, kind of pounding their chest, and they'll present to them, here, I present to you the perfect budget. Now follow it, man or woman. Really? How often does that approach work in life? Come on. This has to be something you do together. Now, the second piece of advice I would tell you is you have to find a budget that works for both of you. I know some of you, you have 26 tabs in an Excel spreadsheet. It's so complex and crazy, and your spouse has no idea what's going on. Or you may use an envelope system and you have 50 envelopes divided up 50 different ways, and your spouse is going nuts trying to keep up with you. Now, let me be honest, starting off, I got pretty nerdy with our budget at the beginning, but I had to simplify because I was driving my wife nuts and she wasn't involved and had no idea what was going on. And as a couple, you're gonna have to do the same thing. So over the years, my wife and I, Jamie, have developed a budgeting system in our family that's really helped us manage our money well and also manage our money where we're on the same page. And it's become more simple too, because in my life, I don't know about you, but everything seems complex. I'm busy, so we came up with a budgeting system that really simplified, I think, our lives. So I want to share it with you as just one idea of how you can budget. And if it helps, great. If not, use what works for you. I've used this system for the past 10 years, and it's based on this philosophy. Other than your tithe, which we've talked about, and which I always do first, every single time I get paid, that's the first thing that goes out. Every time I get paid, other than my tithe, there's only 3 distinct places that my money can go, where I spend money. And here's those 3 places. The first is a category called savings. Now we'll talk about savings in more detail later, but for budgeting purposes, every single time I get paid, I'm depositing money into some sort of savings account for either emergencies or my future. This is not a checking account that has a debit card associated with it. If you're putting your savings into a checking account, trust me, it will just disappear. You know this. It's just what happens, right? You put your money in a checking account that you really want to save, and it just disappears. So a savings account needs to be a separate account that's not easy to access, because it's only there for emergencies in your long-term future. Now, other than savings, the second category I'm going to call bills. Now, this bills account, here's the key with this. These are things during the month that you spend money on that you've already decided in advance what you're going to spend. Now, let me give you some examples of things that you've already decided, and they're going to come every single month. For example, your mortgage or the rent you pay on your house. That comes every month, and you've already decided, you know how much it's going to be. Your car payment, your cell phone, your cable bill, your electricity, your water. You have signed a contract that says every month I'm going to pay these things. And guess what? Every month you have to pay them. Your mortgage payment comes due on the 10th every month, or maybe for some of you it's the 15th. And we act surprised. We get this bill in the mail. We're like, well, yeah, you already agreed to it. And most of the time, these things are the exact same amount. They don't change. Our mortgage, our car payment, they're always the same. Sure, there's some things that do fluctuate a little bit, like our water or our electricity, but we have a good idea of what the average payment of those is going to be. And I'm a big fan of making them similar every month. And if you live in Arizona, for example, you can make your electricity bill the same every month, because I know it fluctuates over the summer, over the winter, but you can call the electric company and say, hey, I would like you to put me on a plan where it's the same every month, and they'll do that for you. So again, these are expenses that you've already decided what they're gonna be, you've signed a contract, and they come due every single month. And I'm a guy that loves to simplify life. So here's how this helps me simplify. What I do is I label every single budget category that's already been decided. I just label it as bills because I've already decided what that's going to be. And here's what I do. I have 2 checking accounts. One of them is specifically for all the bills that I pay every month. I know exactly how much I need to take out of every paycheck that I get to pay those bills. And I just deposit that into that checking account to make sure that every single time a bill comes, I know I have enough to pay it. And guess what? I do not have a debit card associated with this account at all. Now, it took a little work. It took some planning on my part, but let me tell you how freeing this system is for me. When I get a bill in the mail, or I get a bill sent to me electronically, I never, and I mean never, wonder if I can pay it, because I've already set aside money. And when I get a bill, I simply pay that bill out of this account. It's so freeing. Now, the third category is what I would call discretionary spending. These are expenses that you budget for that will be decided. They'll be decided on a daily or a weekly basis. I decide every month how much I'll spend eating out. or how often I'll go to a movie, or how often I'll buy groceries, or what clothes I'm going to buy, or a gadget that I might want. Those are things that are totally up to my discretion. The key is, these are not things that I've signed a contract on and know that I'm going to have to pay a specific amount every single month. They're literally up to my discretion, and they may fluctuate month to month, week to week, day to day. And I have a completely different checking account for this money. Now, here's what most people do. They get paid, they put it in one checking account, and throughout the month, they pay all their bills and all their discretionary spending out of this one account with really no knowledge of the balance and what bills are coming due and if they're gonna have enough to pay it. I mean, they just go through life like guessing. And they just go through the month spending and spending and spending, and when they get a bill in the mail, they hope they can pay for it. I mean, think about how crazy that sounds. Think about how much undue stress you're adding to your life by doing this. So for this category, what I recommend highly is that you do what my wife and I do. When it comes to our discretionary spending, we pull most of that money out in cash. Now, why? Because when you spend with a card versus cash, when you spend with this guy, every single study confirms that you spend 12 to 18% more on a card than when you use cash. Now, why? Because there's usually zero emotion when you pay with a card. When you go on a cruise ship or sometimes other places, they never let you spend in cash. They just hand you a card. Why? And they hand you a card and say, just spend on this and we'll settle up later. Why do they do that? Because they know you're gonna spend more. But just looking at money and its color and how it's green, this invokes emotion. When you put cash down to pay for something, it's completely different than when you just plop down a card. But the second reason that I recommend using cash is this. It's just clear how much money you have left to spend. My wife and I used an envelope system for years, and she managed it for us. And what we did is, when we got paid, we'd simply pull our discretionary spending, most of it out in cash, and she would put it in some simple envelopes for us. One envelope was maybe for groceries, another was for entertainment, another was for eating out. And this just really helped us get a grasp on how much we were spending in each category and how much we had left. And then we learned to just leave a small amount, maybe around $100 in that checking account in case one of us got caught without cash in hand. And the only debit card that we had was one that was associated with this discretionary account. Now, 90% of our spending was done in cash, and that really helped us. And even if you don't use envelopes at all when it comes to this category, I would still say pull it out in cash, because here's the beauty when you spend in cash. When all the cash is gone, guess what? You're done. You're done for that pay period. Why? Because your only other option is to spend out of your bills account. And if you do that, you won't have enough to pay your bills. And then what? Your only other option is a credit card. And we'll talk in a little bit about why that is a bad idea. So when Jamie and I started using this system, I got paid every 2 weeks. And we had several times where we'd be about a week in and we would completely run out of cash. And that discretionary account was drained to zero. And we just looked at each other and we're like, what do we do now? We were done. And as hard as it was, we didn't spend any more money. We look back with fondness on those days because we called them our peanut butter and jelly weeks. Because we'd find ourselves just having no money and the only thing we could eat was peanut butter and jelly. And that was good for us. It just taught us to be disciplined. And over time, we just began to learn more and more about how much we spent and how fast we could spend and about how much needed to go in this envelope and that envelope. And it just worked for us. It was easy and it was clear. Now, some of you may balk at this because, hey, that feels restrictive. Come on. Sure, it's nice to go throughout the week just plopping down a debit card or plopping down a credit card every single time you want to pay for something. I know that seems a little mindless and sometimes that's easy for us, but think about how much stress is added to your life when you realize, I can't pay for a bill that just came in the mail. Or you just keep racking up more and more credit card debt. I'm telling you, there's a better way. And it all starts with a budget. So if the budget system that I just showed you, where you separate out your savings in a savings account, you use 2 checking accounts, one of them for bills and one of them for all your discretionary spending, if that works for you, I would really encourage you to use it. But again, if you already have a budget that works, great, use it. If you find another system that works better, do it. Some of you use Quicken, and it's great for you. You record every single receipt of what you spend every day. God bless you. Use it. Some of you use Excel or Mint.com or another system. Great. The key is just have a budget that actually gets used and works for your family. Now, before we wrap up this section, I just want to give you a few tips, a few tricks, and just answer some frequently asked questions that we often get. Many people work on commission, or they really don't have a regular paycheck, and they always have questions about budgeting. And for those of you in that boat, you're going to need to budget based on an average of what you earn. And you can do that by just looking back on some past earnings history and then averaging it out. But here's the key. Base your income on a conservative amount. Don't get overly aggressive. Don't overestimate, because that will get you in trouble with the budgeting process. If more income comes in than your conservative estimate, great. And you might have a list of extras that you may want to spend that on as you get more income. But base your budget on a conservative amount of your average earnings if it's not regular. I know for some of you couples out there, you do not use a joint checking account. In other words, you work off 2 completely separate budgets in the same household. And what I want to tell you is, I think this is a mistake. When you got married, the Bible said that the 2 of you became one. You're one team. And I believe that when you budget, you need to act as if it's a team sport. And you need to operate as if you're one in every area of your life, including your finances. And so I would just encourage you to get together and say, let's operate out of one account and one set of budgeting. Now, let me also give you some areas of your budget that you should focus on no matter who you are. I'm going to give you 2 categories, groceries and gifts. Groceries are a large expense, and you need to really determine what you need. It's also an area that you can save quite a bit if you become disciplined and diligent with your shopping. So that's an area when you're putting together your budget, just make sure you focus on that area a little bit. Also, gifts are something that can just sneak up on you. So make sure that you have a good idea on what you spend in gifts. My wife and I, we have a set amount on what we spend on gifts for birthdays for our kids and others, and that can really help you with planning. Also, one thing for you couples out there, I highly recommend that when you put together your budget, have a category called fun money, or call it whatever you want to, but this is basically a category where you can spend freely and you don't have any input from the other spouse. What do I mean? Well, my wife and I each have money budgeted that we just call fun money, and it's an amount we've both agreed upon, and each month we each have that amount that we can freely spend on anything we want, no questions asked by the other. And what this really helps with is it helps you get out of arguments and fights about who's spending too much. Finances are often the #1 cause of marital stress. And I've just found when you do this, when you have kind of this category for each of you in the budgeting process, it really helps. So my wife and I don't argue about who's spending too much. If I want to golf or I want to go buy something, a gadget, I have money to do it. And if I don't have enough, guess what? I may need to save for a couple months to buy it. And the same with my wife, Jamie. If she wants something outside of our normal expenses, she has money to do it. Now, one other hint for married couples. Jamie and I also have a set amount that we will not spend unless we run it by the other person. Say it's a piece of furniture or electronic device or whatever it is. For us, we've just set that amount at $100. And you may decide what you want that to be for you. But what we've decided is that we won't spend more than $100 individually without just asking that other person. Now, again, we're a team, and so that's how good teams work. Those are just a few tips, tricks, frequently asked questions for you. But as we wrap up this section, I just want you to know the key for principle number 2 is this. When you realize that you're a steward and you're managing something that's not your own, have a budget and actually use it.
I hope everyone gained a clear understanding of the importance of having a budget. I want to encourage everyone to start saving and investing after they get control of their finances. However, if we want a greater return on our funds than what the banks are willing to offer, I would suggest that we put most of our savings in bonds and annuities. Also, consider investing in real estate and mutual funds. Please spend some time educating yourself in these types of savings and investments. Hope to see you next week as we explore more about stewardship.